Chapter 31. Breaking and Entering. James walked much more quickly than Marvin had expected, covering the dozen blocks to the apartment on East 74th Street in long strides. When they got to the large front stoop, he hesitated, shivering, as he scanned the metal panel of apartment numbers and buzzers. It had started to snow lightly, wet flakes dusting the sidewalk. "What should I do? Push the button?" he asked Marvin. Marvin crawled to the tip of his finger, but with no particular enthusiasm. He knew the apartment was empty. "Let's see, 5D, James said. He read the label again. "Perry, here it is." He pressed. There was no response. James bounced on his sneakers. He looked up at the tall front of the building, blinking away snowflakes. Then he shrugged. "I guess we have to find a way inside, huh? Somebody must be home in one of these places." He dragged his fingers over the double row of buttons, hitting every one. The intercom crackled, with multiple voices sputtering, "Yes?" and "Who is it?" until someone indifferently pressed the release button, and the front door buzzed. Quickly, James turned the handle and pushed his way into the small tiled lobby. They rode the elevator to the 5th floor, and Marvin trying to think how to get into the apartment. He could certainly crawl under the door, but that wouldn't help James. Once inside, he supposed he might be able to set off the fire alarm. Uncle Albert, the electrical whiz, had taught Marvin a few tricks. And if he succeeded, the building superintendent was sure to come and open the door for a look around. But how would James explain what he was doing there? James found the door marked with a brass plate showing 5D. He looked nervously down the hallway. "Okay, I guess I'll knock," he told Marvin. "There better not be some criminal in here." He took a deep breath and tapped on the door. There was no answer. He looked down at Marvin. "Now what do we do?" Marvin ran to James's fingertip and waved his front legs at the door. I know, you want to go inside. But how?" James tried the door handle with both hands. "See? It's locked." Marvin, seeing his chance, crawled quickly onto the doorknob. The only thing he could think to do was to try to spring the lock himself. He took a good long look into the blackness of the keyhole, then plunged inside. "Wait! What are you doing?" James protested. The keyhole was dark and crowded with chunks of cold metal. Marvin could see the workings of the lock with perfect clarity, but he had no idea how to move the mechanism and unlock the door. Great Aunt Mildred, the family locksmith, had given several lectures to the relatives on exactly this topic, but Marvin hadn't realized he'd need the information so soon himself. The secret was some kind of leverage, as he recalled. "Hey!" James whispered through the keyhole, sending a warm blast of air rushing into the tiny space. "Where are you, little guy?" Marvin saw one of James's worried eyes appear in the opening. "Are you trying to open it? Really? That would be so cool." Marvin pushed as hard as he could against the metal bolt, but it wouldn't budge. A minute later, James's breath swooshed into the keyhole again. "Guess what? I have a paperclip in my pocket. Maybe that'll help. Hold on." Marvin heard him rustling, and a moment later, the curved wire end of a paperclip came thrusting into the keyhole. Marvin leapt out of the way right before it almost skewered him. "Take it easy," he thought. "Does that help?" James whispered. Marvin considered the paperclip and the metal bar of the lock. He tried desperately to recall Great Aunt Mildred's instructions. He positioned the paperclip carefully against the mechanism of the lock, then turned himself around and pressed the back of his shell against the paperclip. Wedging his feet against the bar of the lock, he pushed as hard as he could. Nothing. He pushed again. Nothing. "How's it going?" James whispered. "Maybe you aren't strong enough on your own. I'll try turning the paperclip, okay?" Marvin repositioned the paperclip and pushed with all his might just as James began to twist it. Leverage! He heard a dull thunk as the metal bar slid back. It's unlocked, James whispered in delight, opening the door. Marvin scrambled out of the keyhole and onto James's hand. A moment later, they were inside the apartment. Chapter 32. A Revelation. James closed the door softly behind them. He flipped the light switch, surveying the small, tidy living room of the apartment. What is this place? He asked Marvin. Who's Gordon Perry? Who indeed? A friend of Denny's? An accomplice in the theft? Marvin had no idea. He moved to the tip of James's finger and once again dangled his legs in the air. Where do you want to go now? James asked. He began to walk slowly around the living room. Using the technique they'd perfected earlier, Marvin guided James, with a few false stops and starts, to the closed door of the study. Okay, James said. In here. He opened the door and stepped inside. Huh. He looked around, scanning the bookshelves and table. Then he walked to the desk, glancing at the stack of mail. This is his place, all right. But there's nothing here, little guy. What do we do now? He hesitated in front of the window, staring gloomily out at the falling snow. I have to go back. My dad'll really be worried, and if he calls my mom, well, you know how she is. No, not yet, James, Marvin begged. He ran back and forth along James's finger. Okay, relax. What are you trying to tell me? James turned toward the closet, where Marvin was pointing himself. Something in there? Marvin scurried to the end of James's finger and drummed all his legs in place, doing a frantic dance. His brow furrowing, James crossed the room and opened the closet door, revealing a jumble of coats and a few packing boxes. The briefcase was on the floor in the back. Marvin flung his front legs over the precipice of James's fingertip, waving them in midair. What? James asked, squatting on his heels. It's just a bunch of boxes. What are you so excited about? Marvin whirled in circles, desperate for James to discover Denny's secret. Is it something about the drawing? Overcome with frustration, Marvin hurled himself from James's finger to the floor and ran across the wooden boards to the briefcase. Oh, James said. That thing? Okay, let's see. He picked up Marvin very gently and tugged the briefcase out of the closet. Sitting on the floor, he set it on its side and flipped the latches. It's just a bunch of papers, he said. Marvin dove off his finger once again, landing smack in the middle of the packaging that surrounded the drawings. Listen, little guy, we have to go back to the museum. I don't know what you think is here, but... Marvin pounded on the top layer of paper with his legs, thoroughly beside himself. James took a deep breath. I don't think we should mess around with this stuff. That Perry guy will notice and get mad. Marvin rolled onto his back and waved all 6 legs in the air, as dramatic an SOS sign as he could think of. Geez, James said, you're going crazy. He touched the top edge of the paper with his fingers. With all his might, Marvin flipped himself onto his stomach and ran to the edge of the sheet. James shifted it aside and hesitantly unwrapped what was underneath. He gasped. There, unveiled in all its glory, was fortitude. James stared. It's the real one, he said haltingly, as if he couldn't trust his own eyes. It is, isn't it? He looked down at Marvin in amazement. You found it, the one that was stolen. How did you do that? James sprang to his feet, trembling. He began to pace around the table, gripping his head with both hands and talking so fast that Marvin could barely keep up. The Perry guy must have taken it. We have to tell my dad. We have to tell Christina and Denny. What if he comes back? What if he finds us here? Suddenly, James reached down and plucked Marvin from the paper, positioning him snugly under his cuff. He looked around the room. Spying the phone on the desk, he rushed to it. "We'll call my dad," he said. "He'll know what to do." He punched the numbers and held the phone tightly against his cheek, waiting. After a minute, he groaned. "It's not going through. He must be someplace where his cell phone doesn't work." Marvin tried to think what to do, but James didn't hesitate. He punched in more numbers. "Hello? New York City. Can I have the phone number for the Met?" "Yeah, the museum." "No, wait, not the recording. I need a real person." "Yeah, that's good. Thanks." He wrote a number on the pad of paper on the desk, then dialed it. "Hi, can you connect me to Christina Balcony's office?" Then James's voice exploded with excitement. Denny, it's me, James. I found the drawing. I found Fortitude." Chapter 33. Trapped. Marvin froze. "Denny? Don't tell Denny!" He wanted to scream. But of course, James had no way of knowing that Denny was the thief. He was already babbling ecstatically into the phone. "No, really, I'm in somebody's apartment. This guy, Gordon Perry. The address is..." Here, James read from the crinkled label. 236 East 74th Street, apartment 5D. "No, don't tell him!" Marvin raced onto James's hand. "It's the real one. I know it is. I can't explain on the phone. Can you get my dad?" There was a long pause. "Oh," James said. "He is? Okay, but you'll tell him and Christina too? And can you please hurry? I don't know when this guy might come back." He hung up and looked down triumphantly at Marvin. "We did it!" he crowed, dancing around the table. "Dad and Christina weren't there. They'd gone to look for me. But Denny's going to find them and tell them, and then they'll all come over here. Everything's going to be fine." "Oh, no!" Marvin slumped in despair. This was impossible. How could he make James understand that they were in terrible danger? Nobody knew they were here but Denny. And Denny, the real thief, was on his way to the apartment. He certainly wouldn't tell Carl or Christina anything. Marvin trembled. What would he do with the drawings when he got here? More important, what would he do with James? James lifted his hand and peered at Marvin, tilting his head to one side. "What's the matter, little guy? You don't seem very happy." Marvin took a deep breath, trying to shake off his hopelessness. He had to convince James to leave the apartment and to take the drawings with him. But how? He crawled to the end of James's finger and motioned with his front legs. "Where do you want to go now?" James asked, looking at him quizzically. I think we should just wait till they all get here." Marvin continued to gesture toward the briefcase. James walked doubtfully over to the closet and crouched on the floor, holding out his hand so Marvin could disembark. Marvin crawled straight to the part of the briefcase with the handle and latches and waited there expectantly. "You want me to shut it again?" James asked. Marvin climbed onto one of the latches. "Why? Denny and Dad and Christina are on their way here. Can't we let them do it?" Marvin tapped his front legs imperatively. James paused. "I'm scared I'll wreck the drawing." When Marvin didn't budge, he sighed. "You can be really bossy. Do you know that?" He fiddled with the packaging sheets. "But I guess you've been right about most things so far. And you did find the drawing." He sighed again. "Okay, watch out." Gently, he wrapped the paper sheets over Fortitude, and while Marvin clung to the latch, closed the briefcase.